Good morning, students. I'm going to talk today a little bit about right triangles and identifying the opposite leg, the adjacent leg, and the hypotenuse when we're talking about trigonometry. And again, this is kind of a precursor here at Evansville. So the big thing we're going to do today is make sure we understand that this only works with right triangles that have a 90-degree angle in them, okay? And we always got to start with that. And a right triangle consists of basically two parts. It consists of the hypotenuse, which is always across from the 90-degree angle. And then it has two legs that are left. And the green marks indicate the legs. Okay? And they can be short, they can be equal, but one can be longer than the other. There's a whole bunch of options with that. The big thing in this course is that we will always be working off an acute angle. So I will mark this angle to start with. And every time we do this now, we have to identify the opposite of that leg of that angle and the adjacent leg to that angle. So if I put a guy here and he looks out over here across, this would be the opposite leg, and I'm just going to write OPP. All right, we've identified the hypotenuse, that's always the same, it's across from 90. We picked our angle and we looked out and that's the opposite. That leaves the last leg here to be the adjacent. All right, and again, this is a skill that we're going to need to do trigonometry. Alone, it doesn't make much sense. But I want to be clear, right now I erased all that because now I'm going to identify off the other angle. Because one of the big misconceptions is like the opposite is short, the adjacent is long. That doesn't happen. So if I stand on this angle and I look across, and I put my guy here now on this angle, this is the opposite leg. Hypotenuse across from the 90, opposite across from the angle, that leaves the adjacent to be this leg here this time. And it changes based on which angle you're on. So when I have a diagram, and I can orient them any way I want, all right, I not only need a 90-degree triangle, I need to mark one of the angles. All right, then I'm going to do these three, and then there's a practice sheet attached to this if you need more practice. All right, I'm going to do it in one pen color. The 90 degrees here, so we look out. That's the hypotenuse. It has nothing to do with the acute angle. Then we stand on this angle, the one that's marked, and we look across. And this leg is the opposite. Once you've identified the opposite and the hypotenuse, that just leaves the adjacent, which will be this leg right here. On the next triangle, it's been spun a little, but it doesn't matter. Here's the 90-degree mark here. We look across, that is the hypotenuse. I stand on this angle right here this time. I mark this acute angle. And I look across, and this is the opposite. We identify the hypotenuse and the opposite. That leaves this leg as the adjacent. Last one. 90 across, hypotenuse. And you guys notice I'm just abbreviating, okay? Now I got this angle right here. I look across from it. This is the opposite. And this is the adjacent. Now in my classroom, we practice this skill quite a bit. And eventually we get to what I call a little trig quiz or an OAH quiz, opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse quiz, OAH. And it says the instructions identify the side labeled as X, as the adjacent, the opposite, or the hypotenuse for the angle shown. All right, the angle shown has to be that acute angle. So now this worksheet's attached. You can look at it, try to do the work, okay, or you can watch me do it. Again, I'll go through this quite quickly here, all right? In this triangle, here's the 90, we look across. So X is the hypotenuse this time. It's across from 90. I don't even care about the 27 degrees. If I have the 27 mark and I look across, 14 would be the opposite side. And there is an adjacent side, just doesn't have a label. So there's the adjacent. On the next triangle, I look across. 15 is the hypotenuse. I have 46, I look across from the 46, so x is the opposite this time. And again, this time, the adjacent, again, it doesn't have a label, but it's still a side. All right, and I'm gonna start just using H, O, and A here for the rest of them. I look across to the 11, that's the hypotenuse. I find the 63 and look across. The unmarked leg of the triangle is the opposite. And this time, the adjacent is x. On 4, you look across. The hypotenuse this time doesn't have a label, it's still right there. You circle the 50, you look across from the 58, that's the opposite, 12. So again, the adjacent is x. Number 5, don't even care. Hypotenuse is right there. Circle the angle, look across. There's our opposite. All right, and our adjacent is 17. So this time x is h, so x is the hypotenuse. I look across. The hypotenuse doesn't have a label, but it's still this longest leg of the right triangle. And then again, these have to be right triangles. Circle the 29, look across. 20 is the opposite. And again, for 6, x is the adjacent. Let's scroll the board up here to the last 4. Look across on 7, the hypotenuse is here. Here's our angle, look across. X is the opposite this time, so that's the answer. That would leave 16 as the adjacent. Look across from the right angle. There's the hypotenuse. X is the hypotenuse on this triangle. Again, if I circle the 62, the opposite is this, and the 13 is the adjacent. Last 2. I stand on 90, I look across. 20 is the hypotenuse. I circle the angle and look across from it. This time x is the opposite. The unlabeled leg is the adjacent. 20 on 10, look across. 20 is the hypotenuse. Look across from the 68. The x is the opposite and the unlabeled is the adjacent. Again, this is a big deal for us as we come to trigonometry, sine, cosine, and tangent. If we're struggling with these, it makes those really difficult, so we'll continue to quiz on it. Keep going. If you need more practice, see you.